Welcome to Corporate Cafecito,
a Latin and business podcast where we share insights and strategies to help entrepreneurs and professionals thrive.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Corporate Cafecito. Yo soy Nayeli Suarez Gas.
Y yo soy Carlos Butler Vale. Bienvenidos.
So today we have another inspiring Latina because that is our commitment to you, to bring you people who have inspired us, who have caught our attention, who we say like, I kind of want to be like her when I grow up. So Janelle, welcome to our show. Bienvenida de New York. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. Happy to be here. So my name is Janelle Romero. I am Dominican American. I'm a labor and employment attorney in New York City. So I represent employees who have been subjected to wage theft or discrimination or sexual harassment or retaliation in the workplace. And I sue employers, basically.
But you didn't start, right? Like in employment law, this was something that you it kind of called to your heart. You know, I remember when we were talking, you were like, yeah, it wasn't where I started, but it's where I was called.
Yeah, I mean, I think I say like a theme in my life is I just kind of fall into things and luckily they work out. When I was in college, I thought I was going to go to medical school. I went to my guidance counselor and I was like, the math and science is just not working out so well for me. And I thought, I like reading and writing. Maybe I can go to law school. And I remember him saying, like, you're very soft spoken. I don't think that this is a good path for you. And
You're like,
honestly,
now I'm for real doing it.
I know at the time I didn't even know I really wanted to be a lawyer, but I was just like, well, it looks like I'm going to law school. And regardless of whether I, become a lawyer or use my law degree in a different way, this is what we're doing. Actually, when I graduated law school, I emailed that guidance counselor to thank him
Did he reply?
got my law degree. Um, and then, yeah, even when I graduated law school, I still wasn't even sure that I still wanted to be a lawyer. I was kind of like looking at all the different options of what I could do with my law degree. I made a list of all the things I knew I didn't want to do. And then I started just doing some trials at different firms. And I ended up working with this employment firm that at the time, we basically only did cases of wage theft. And I would say 98% of our clients were only Spanish speaking. They were undocumented immigrants who were being paid under the table and taken advantage of. Um, and I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with my clients and their stories. And I joke that like for a while I got to feel like a superhero. Like it was so cool to see people who, came to this country working 80, 90, 100 hours a week and being robbed really, not being paid their overtime, being paid so little. And then we settle this case and we're able to get them a check for like 150, $200,000. It's like, it's very life changing to them.
Amazing. Yeah.
So we would get, and I was the only Spanish speaking attorney at the firm. So even though I had basically just graduated law school, I was very quickly like allowed to do everything in the cases. And if I wasn't doing it, I was like right next to the attorney who was doing it because I was translating for our clients. So I got to get a pretty big head start in my career and learning how to do those cases working at that firm. Um, and it was so nice to just hear their stories. Some of them would even bring their kids in to meet me so that, they could see if they wanted to be a lawyer.
Yeah. They could grow up to be like you. We have
Yeah,
to show them like what the end path could look like.
yeah, it was cool. I mean, we had clients that couldn't read or write. And we'd have to like read the retainer agreement to them and kind of just say, like, can you write your name, like just as a signature here? And then to give them a check for like $150,000, they would tell me about how they were building things back home. They built a little schoolhouse or a clinic or things that would make their families lives better. A lot of them just wanted to go back home. They were like, life was better there, I just need more money to do it. So they'd kind of recreate what their life looked like back home so that they could create a pathway to go back home.
Talk
Uh,
about the importance of representation. I mean, the fact that you were saying 90%, I think, upwards around that, of your clients were Spanish speaking, and you were the only Spanish speaker at your firm. I'm sure made a tremendous difference. It sounds like not only for your clients but also for you. And it seemed to open up a lot of doors. That led to you having some moments where you leverage this as an opportunity to be able to just bring information and awareness to the masses. I don't know, and maybe you have some percentages. I typically like to, bring stuff with me, but I can't even imagine the prevalence of wage theft, for example. And I think that's something that is apolitical. That is something that obviously happens, that has happened basically for all of time. But I think what's interesting is that a lot of the population that you were working with in particular were undocumented folks. And so that brings me to sort of today. But how did you take some of those experiences and use them as a launching pad? Because you talk about you not sure being sure that you wanted to go to law school, and then sort of it sounds like you went right into the thick of it, and then you use it as an opportunity, and you pivoted too. And we talk a lot about pivots, so talk to us about some of those for you.
Yeah, so all of our paralegals were Spanish speaking. I was the only Spanish speaking attorney. So there's certain rooms, certain things that only attorneys can be present in. And so that's why I got to do so much more than I typically would have just coming out of law school.
Mhm.
I noticed that a lot of our clients, they had these great wage theft cases, but then they also had discrimination cases. And unfortunately, it's the immigrants who have like the worst discrimination cases that they just kind of think that's part of the deal. They would tell me, oh,
Yeah.
my manager would yell at me about my accent or not speaking English or, just different race or religious based, gender based discrimination, sexual harassment. And they were just like, well, that was just my job and that was my boss. And I'm like, no, we can do something about that. But at that time, at that firm, we didn't practice discrimination law. So I went and worked for a firm on Wall Street that's pretty well known in New York City for handling discrimination cases. Um, and then I learned what I needed to learn there, went back to the first firm because I just loved those clients, and I started up their discrimination department. And
Awesome.
so while I was working there, I was trying to figure out how to bring in more cases. And it was basically right at the start of COVID. We were all just sitting at home. And I was like, well, my I have 3 younger sisters, and they were all pretty actively on TikTok. And I still had not gotten on the TikTok bandwagon, and they were like, "No, no, you have to do it. Just start talking on TikTok." So I started making videos on TikTok. Um, in the beginning, I'll admit I was really awkward, like, it's hard to do to, like, talk to your phone. Over time, as I got more used to it, but, I just started making videos, like, talking about what I do, the kinda cases I work on, just explaining to people, like, you don't have to be okay with this, especially because during COVID, um, everything changed. I mean, it was like
Mhm.
before COVID, the workplace environment was very much, um, your job is like a favor to you. And you
Mm,
have to be grateful for what you get because that pays your bills. And then all of a sudden, during COVID, you have all these attorneys getting online and teaching you your rights for free. You
mm,
realize that you
Yeah.
actually do have access to an attorney because you don't have to pay a retainer fee up front. And people kind of just had enough. It was like, all right, well, if you're making me choose between my health or my family and my job, I'm gonna choose, my health and my family. And
mm.
so people started quitting. All of a sudden, all these places didn't have employees, and it was like you could go anywhere. If I wasn't happy here, I could quit tomorrow. I'll get another job that'll pay me more because everybody's desperate for employees. So we had that great resignation. All the employees had the upper hand, and things really changed in the workplace. It no longer it was almost like for a period of time, like, employers were afraid of their employees, like, they just wanted you to stay.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
and
I
so
remember that time, and it was very interesting because even with like the return to work or return to the office, people were hesitant to pull that trigger because they're like, we're going to lose everybody and
Yeah.
they can find new jobs in a month. And so it was very like, it was so, you're right, it was stressful as the employer. Um, I would say as the employee, it felt like they had a lot more
Yeah.
oomph. Yeah,
Leverage,
Yeah,
leverage.
it's a
Yeah.
good time to leverage for more
leverage. That's
calories,
it.
for,
Not oomph. Yeah.
more that
Yeah.
you want to eat.
I saw a
Mhm.
sign the other day that said we went from being um what is it? What was it? The workers type that they used to be called? Essential workers. There was a sign that said we went from being essential workers to being illegal, or to being illegals. And so to your point, I mean, there was a moment in time where we would not have been able to function, without a lot of the folks that, again, not to get political, but a lot of the folks that today are sort of being villainized. At one point, there was this recognition that they were so essential to our economy, to our workplace, that, obviously there was a point of leverage there that folks probably hadn't
Yeah.
felt for a long time. And so,
Especially here.
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, no, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just meant like, in New York City, we run by like delivery. Everything gets delivered. So like our delivery drivers bringing food, bringing like all of that. It was so essential during COVID. And
But
they no,
oh, I guess, well, I ran a delivery company. I had a trucking company, and we did last mile delivery. And I would say it was such a mixed emotion of like doing all the deliveries. But then we would get people who would be mad at us because we wouldn't talk. We were like, well, we don't know you and we don't want to get close to you. But people hadn't seen people in a long time. And then they're like, they want to chat. And we're like, we're on a schedule. We got to go. It was such a weird time.
Yeah, that is strange. And I don't like to relive those moments, for a number of reasons. But so you leverage TikTok. You went through. You use that as a jumping point. Talk to us a little bit about what that journey was for you. And you talk a lot about the stories that you heard directly from people when you were in the firm. I'm sure that changed when all of a sudden you went from being like a personality on TikTok, and maybe someone's message getting through to you. But how did you continue to leverage that? And then that, I think, from what I recall, sort of led to where you are today too, right?
yeah. So um the more discrimination cases I was doing, the more I kind of was interested on how are companies handling this? How does HR work? How things work internally. I decided to work for a startup, which was the craziest experience because it was a Latin American-based startup. So all of a sudden I had to be a lawyer in Spanish, which I speak Spanish. I don't speak lawyer Spanish. Uh, so
Business Spanish. I
yeah.
can't even imagine lawyer Spanish, but business Spanish is already difficult enough.
Yeah.
And then like startup is also another language on its own, and that in Spanish,
Sure.
I was just like my head was spinning. But um we basically were helping employers hire people in other countries. So I would have to work with lawyers in those countries to learn their labor laws and figure out how we could establish employers in those countries. And I got to figure out labor laws in like 26 different countries in a short amount of time, which was great. But I was still making videos on TikTok because people just kept asking questions. So I was making videos in response to those questions, and I was getting so many messages from people who had valid cases. I just wasn't litigating anymore. I decided to start my own firm, which was honestly something I never really planned to do. Um, and it was doing really well. And then my boss, who I currently work for, actually found me on TikTok and was like, "Hey, do you want a job?" And I was like, "Absolutely not." Um,
Like, I have a job and I have a company.
um, and we had a bunch of meetings. I met his partner, and we basically the firm that I joined did not practice employment law. So we worked out a deal where basically I could start up their employment practice and still have some sense of autonomy and while getting to work with the resources of having a larger firm. Now I can handle cases in almost every state. Um, and, TikTok, I think, was a huge launching pad for me in making a name for myself, I guess. I'm a pretty shy person. Like if I go, I'm not great with networking events. I don't really like outwardly just approach people. I'm working on it, but it's not going so great for me. And so I was really surprised with how many people knew me just because of TikTok. Like I would start getting referrals from attorneys I've never met or heard of. And or I'd join a case and the attorney was like, "Oh, I've seen you before, I've heard of you." And so I feel like I got to establish myself pretty early in my career um, through the use of TikTok, which sounds so weird, but
That's
it's such an
amazing.
amazing tool.
But
And I
I think that it's been I think it's really key because a lot of times, and I'll say this even from my own experience, like you don't know what you can do legally. Like, the only thing we know is like based on our community. So we know like, oh, if you do this, you have to get an abogado. But other than that, you don't really we wouldn't know these things. And I think about just even, one of my friends who's undocumented, he hurt his hand and they cut him like a really small check and he went back to Mexico. And I was like, you probably could have gotten so much more money, but we didn't know.
Yeah.
And I think that bringing that awareness to our community is really important. I think two things that you do is really important. One is getting that message out so that we know like what rights we do have. And then secondly, I think it's really amazing to show like here you are, this beautiful young Latina who's like advocating for everybody else. You're like, you are a superhero. Like you're making sure people understand their rights and how to execute them in this country. And especially when we don't know the language, like that kind of advocacy is really beautiful.
And it's different when you're doing it for the people that you know. I mean, like to your point, Nayeli, I love sharing information with my network. I love sharing it with everybody I know. If there's something that I'm aware of, I'm like, hey, get on this. But it's a completely different thing to do it with strangers.
Mhm.
I mean,
Right.
and that really is obviously what you're doing. And it just reminds me, maybe Nayeli, we need to get on TikTok too. I do not have a TikTok account. But there is I love that there's so many parallels, obviously, to what Nayeli shared, and by the way, you're doing all of this really quickly while also starting a family, and you have now uh, reached the point where you are a mother. Tell us a little bit about how that transition has been for you and how you're balancing all of these things, because I think there's a lot of parallels to
Mhm.
a lot of our listeners who are trying to figure out how to maybe take that next pivot or look at their next step and figure out how to balance it.
yeah, I mean, I think becoming a mother has given me so much perspective that as much as I could have tried to understand, I don't think you can really have until you live it. I hate to say that because I know people would say that to me before, and I was like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, like whatever. I was the best parent before I had a kid.
I know. And so, like even the pregnancy discrimination cases I work on, seeing now and putting into perspective like what I went through in pregnancy and picturing myself in some of those situations, it's like, wow, this is so much even worse than I imagined.
Right.
And there were so many things that I didn't expect to feel that even now I'm still kind of processing because I'm not proud of it. Like I remember going to court and I had my big belly and I felt like embarrassed. Like it was the weirdest thing because I wasn't embarrassed of being pregnant or anything, but I almost felt like maybe I was going to be taken less seriously or,
Yeah.
it's really hard to fit into a suit when you're pregnant. So I had to kind of modify my court outfits and I almost felt like walking in, like, everyone's like, "Oh, happy to welcome you," and whatever, and that's great. There was nothing wrong with that, but I weirdly felt like, you know, maybe, there's those stereotypes of like mommy brain or things like that, where it was like I felt like people, and it could have just been in my head, I don't know.
Mm.
I just felt like maybe I was being looked at as like a pregnant woman instead of a lawyer, or both. Um, and
Yeah.
and so I really didn't do much networking while I was pregnant. I mean, I was happy to be pregnant despite the fact that I was really sick. And I didn't have any negative feelings about it, but I had a really hard time trying to figure out what it meant for me to now be in this new role while keeping the role that I previously had, because I didn't have any plans to slow down my career or um you know I didn't even really take maternity leave, which I don't recommend as an employment attorney.
You need
Tell
to
everyone
take it.
I made
Yeah.
a mistake. Don't do what I did. I took like
No,
off. I should have
I
taken a full maternity leave, like terrible idea. But I was just in a place where I was like, no, no, like if I take too much time off, everything's gonna fall apart while I'm gone, and then I'm gonna come back and it's gonna be chaos. And I don't know, I was in such denial. Like I thought I was gonna have the baby and just,
bounce right back.
figure it out. And to the extent that I can, I guess I have been, but it's definitely it's just a day by day thing. I mean, we were saying earlier, even with TikTok, every single day, I'm like, I'm gonna get back on TikTok. I'm gonna start consistently making videos. Like before, I was pumping out 1, 2 videos a day, sometimes a couple a week. Now it's been like a couple months. So I'm saying this now so that I can like force
Yes,
myself
we're gonna record this, and when
back
when
up.
this gets
Yeah.
published, we're gonna be like, "Let's see how many videos she's done since then."
But yeah,
I interviewed when I was pregnant, and I was 33 weeks for the first interview and 35 weeks for the second interview, and I had one black dress, and that was the dress I went to, like, customer meetings with, sales calls, evening dinners, and I just remember going into interview and being like, "Oh my god, I don't wanna run into el señor que me entrevistó la vez pasada because this is the only dress I have," and luckily I didn't. But yeah, it was so uncomfortable, and I was just like and I walked in and they looked at me, and I was like, "I'm pregnant." Like, you know, like they wouldn't have
yeah.
known. Like, it was just so weird. I'm like, "Why am I acting like this?"
Yeah, it just feels like something you just have to kind of like, "Let's address
Yeah.
this now," like, you can treat me like, how I normally am, which is I mean, I don't
I
know.
love the
Yeah.
fact that you're using this as a point of reflection. Uh, you started by saying that, you're still trying to understand why you may have felt that way or what caused you to sort of, feel that you weren't sure if some of it was, you or some of it was really the environment. But one of the things that you did say was that you have use that experience as a way to create a more empathetic approach to obviously some of the cases that you have or that you come across. And so I don't want to let that slip by because I think that that is so important to highlight. It's certainly stood out to me. I don't know what it's like to be a lawyer, or certainly what it's like to be a pregnant lawyer with a belly, or to be pregnant for that matter. But for what it's worth, I mean, there have been several circumstances in my career, my corporate career, where I have felt, I've walked into a room and I felt othered in some way, shape, or form. And, I try to use those experiences to figure out how to help mitigate some of that feeling for others and invite others into the room. And so I want to say that that was something that stood out to me, and I commend you for and yes, absolutely. If this can be a catalyst, I think just given the stories that I'm hearing and the questions that are swirling around, if this podcast right here can be a catalyst for you to get back out there, no
Get
pressure.
back on the horse. We need you,
Yeah,
Janelle.
get back on the horse. That would be a great check box. That would be a great check off the list for us because truly I think, without a doubt, you know this, but others obviously have certainly made it clear that what you share and what you provide is of value. So fantastic, fantastic work.
Thank you.
Hey,
Um,
Janelle, I think about like the guidance counselor that you said kind of motivated you by saying you wouldn't go to law school. Who are some of the people that inspired you? Because I find you very inspirational. Like, who do you lean on, or who drives you?
um, I think everyone in my life to a certain extent. I always try to surround myself with people that have something or are doing something better than me. And so I really do feel that all of my friends, everyone in my life, in one way or another, not just professionally, but personally, emotionally,
Mhm.
whatever it is, I really try to draw from the people around me to better whatever part of my life I think it is that they've really mastered. So, obviously, I'm very inspired by my parents and motivated by my parents, but I think that that's something that they instilled in my sisters and I is just, using every part of your life as an opportunity to better. And I mean, that's part of why, like, I'm saying I felt so weird about feeling othered while being pregnant because honestly, I've never had, like, my sisters and I joke that, like, my dad always raised us to think that, like, there's no reason why we can't be the best at everything we do.
Mm,
And so when I was younger, I used to get upset because I'd be like, "Oh, I got a B," and he'd be like, "Well, why didn't you get an A? Did anyone else get an A? Because you probably could have done that." And like I and so, but I feel, and I've talked about this on other podcasts, like I don't walk into a room and feel like I don't belong. I'm like, if I'm here for a reason.
mhm,
So, and even with like I work in the Southern District of New York and the Eastern District of New York. Like the big thing now is the Diddy trial. I'm like, I know that judge,
mhm.
I've gone before him. And so like
Oh my God, that's so cool.
cases like Trump's case and all the I know those judges and that's the court I practice in. And even with those judges, obviously there's a sense of respect and all of that, but I don't think they're better than me. I don't have that feeling of like people always ask me because I'm a Latina and I'm in law and they're like, "Oh, how do you deal with imposter syndrome?" And I'm like, "Who says I have imposter syndrome?" Like,
Yeah, don't assign my imposter
walk
syndrome.
into a room just as comfortable as like another person who, does just because I'm brown, like I should
I
feel
love that.
like, and so there's 2 times in my life that I've ever felt that way. One was when I first graduated law school, and it wasn't because I felt like I wasn't good enough, it's because I did not know what I was doing. Like, law school doesn't teach you how to be a lawyer. So, I didn't like to tell people I was a lawyer because I was like, "If you ask me anything about it, I don't know what to tell you." And so, once I actually started feeling like I was really practicing law, then I felt comfortable with that. And then the second time was when I was pregnant. But other than that, I've never really had that feeling of feeling like I don't belong here. Like, why am I here? I'm in this room for a reason. And so that's like a big thing that I like to push is that I don't know why. I feel like if I was white and I did interviews, people probably would not ask me like how I deal with imposter syndrome. And so
If you were a woman, they might.
maybe, yeah.
Maybe,
But,
just maybe. There's some parallels. It's funny, Janelle, you were just I laugh at your story about not knowing how to be a lawyer. I just saw a meme today. It was like someone said, when you use Chat GPT to pass the bar exam, but you get the first case assigned to you is someone who's been sentenced to death or who might be sentenced to death. It's like, and I think about just the journey that you've been on and the journey that you will continue to be on, obviously, with some of these new technologies. And it just reminded me of like AI in the legal space and the complexities of what you're doing. And so I want to ask you, because we've had a really good robust conversation about where you've been and what you've been up to. um, is there anything that you could share with us about what's kind of next for you, or like what's ahead of you right now?
I have no idea. I firmly believe every time I make a plan, God laughs. So, um, right now I'm working for this firm. I very much enjoy it. I have an amazing team. One thing that makes me so proud is that my lead associate who kind of works side by side, under my guidance is also a Dominican woman. And I
Mm,
love when we're like on a court conference on Zoom or something, and it's like I get to see me and her as like the attorneys representing our clients. It makes me so proud. And yeah,
What's her name? Do you mind sharing?
yeah, her
Give her a
name
shout
is Pamela Rosario. She's amazing. Um,
out.
but yeah, I think right now I'm very happy with where I'm at. I'm very comfortable in what I'm doing. Who knows if, how long I'll be doing it or what
yeah.
will happen next, but I'm good here. I also
That-
like I have a 5-month-old, so I'm not trying to
yeah.
I've got enough chaos in my life right now as it is.
I love that. One of the things that Nayeli pointed out is you are very inspirational. I feel inspired. I felt inspired when we first connected. I feel inspired today. Um, and it just made me think, I've been thinking about this whole TikTok thing as, you getting messages potentially from people who might need your legal advice. But the other element that I think is so amazing about who you are, and I think inspiring another generation or the next generation of Latin lawyers, by the way, we started talking about the fact that representation is so important. And maybe, just maybe, hopefully, a lot of the messages that you're also getting are from people who are being inspired by you. Maybe there's that Latina out there who or Latino who or Latina who is seeing your videos and is interested or suddenly becomes interested in law, or maybe they do get that same conversation or a similar conversation from their guidance counselor, and then they see you out there filming a video. That what a great thing to do. And so maybe that's what's next for you, is to just continue to do you and continue to inspire the next generation of Latin lawyers who, by the way, very much have an important place that they're playing, not just today, but as you've demonstrated throughout as well. So just a little plug there.
Yeah, I mean, I get a lot of those messages. I screenshot them all. I have a little folder where it's like
Oh, nice.
it makes me smile. Um, yeah, I mean, even you guys should get on to, you never know who's watching. So one day it's someone who's inspired by you, the next day it's someone who will inspire you and who can help you and put you in front of the right people who will show your video to somebody that you never would have imagined, would see your videos. It's like it's crazy how you'll make a video talking about something. Next thing you know, like the celebrity you're talking about is liking your video, and then you're like, I wonder, who saw my video? Who in what room was that being shared? And like, then next thing you know, a reporter's reaching out, and like, and so there's just so many opportunities that open up through that. That I'm a huge advocate for putting yourself out there, even if it feels weird or somebody might, there's some shade, but it's fine.
No, I love that. And that's really good advice. I guess before we wrap up, any parting words, Janelle? Any last words of wisdom, tips, advice, shout outs?
Um, so one thing that I think I wish I would have heard earlier as a Latina that I feel like is not a big part of our culture is that it's always okay to ask for more.
Mm,
I feel like if I would
Yeah.
have known that early on, there were so many things in life that I had no idea I could ask for that probably would have made, I mean, I didn't
Yeah.
know you could negotiate a scholarship. I didn't know that there's just so many things that it's like if you have a question, if you want a mentor, if you're considering doing something and you want to be like that person, ask them. Um, I feel like, yeah, we're always taught like take what you get and be grateful and be humble, which is such a beautiful part of Hispanic culture, but it's also okay to
mm.
ask for more. And that's something that this career has taught me that I really appreciate.
I love that. I love that. Well, that and those parting words. Thank you, Janelle, for being on. I'm sure we will continue to reach out to you, and we will obviously be stalking your TikTok to see when you make your return. Um, but we appreciate you not only coming in and sharing your story, but the work that you do for our community and uplifting us and also modeling what amazing, brilliant, beautiful Latina in legal looks like. So thank you. You make us all look good.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on, Janelle.
All right. Well then, thank you guys for joining us on Corporate Cafecito. Yo soy Nayeli Suarez Gas.
Yo soy Carlos Pelder Valle. Hasta la próxima.